Since around the time Avengers Endgame released, I've heard of people watching the MCU in chronological order, meaning they watch the films and other various Marvel projects, not in release order, but instead in order of when each project is set within the universe. For example, this means they start with Captain America the First Avenger instead of Iron Man 1, because Captain America is set in the 1940s and Iron Man is set in 2008, meaning that Captain America comes first in chronological order, despite the fact that it was released 3 years after Iron Man 1. And frankly, I think this chronological order viewing method is a stupid way to experience the MCU for the first time. Though, if not experiencing it for the first time, many of the points I'm going to make in this video don't apply. So enjoy your media however you like to enjoy your media. Hell, even if you're really set on experiencing the MCU for the first time in chronological order, don't let some YouTubers stop you. Unless you agree with what I'm about to say anyway. Writers often use nonlinear storytelling as a narrative device to enrich their storytelling and enable plot twists and resonant moments that might not have been possible otherwise. For a famous example of this, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey just released. Very good film, by the way, and that movie uses nonlinear storytelling to enhance the satisfaction the audience garners from reveals and character moments that occur in the third act of the film. Nolan is a very prominent director known for his nonlinear storytelling in films like Oppenheimer, Interstellar, and Inception. Now, imagine if Nolan structured Inception, for instance, as a linear story. We would already know why Dom Cobb's dead wife, Mal, keeps appearing in the mazes and hunts the main cast. We'd already know about Cobb's tragic backstory of his wife before we ever saw him pull a job. The film would lose so much narrative tension if the story was told like this, because the answers would come before the questions, which is a large part of what makes Inception so interesting. But enough of using this video as a Trojan horse, get it, to discuss Nolan's filmography.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Let's get into the MCU. Even though the MCU has a whole suite of different directors instead of one centralized visionary like Christopher Nolan, the MCU also benefits from its non-linear narrative structure. Granted, the MCU's non-linear structure is external instead of Inception's internal, but the point still applies. And to remove this non-linear structure totally wrecks how the storytellers behind the MCU intended their story to be experienced. And you, as an audience member, also miss out on parts of this experience too. Whether you're experiencing the MCU in release order or chronological order, you're still going to start somewhere in Phase 1 of the MCU. In release order, Phase 1 includes 2 Iron Man movies, a Hulk movie, a Thor movie,
the Captain America movie,
and finally the first Avengers film. Phase 1 is very focused on setting up these central characters and the foundations of their decade-long arcs, which are capitalized in the first Avengers movie and then further explored in later installments of the MCU. But when you watch the MCU in chronological order, you completely annihilate that narrative focus and cohesion by throwing in stuff like Agent Carter, Captain Marvel, and a funny thing happened on the way to Thor's hammer, a Marvel one-shot.
Hey, Editing West here. Yeah, apparently the funny thing happens on the way to Thor's hammer actually is in Phase 1 in release order, so my bad. Anyways, point still stands. Moving on.
For now though, I'll focus on Captain Marvel as a microcosm for the issues I'm discussing, though I believe they're present in every phase of the MCU when viewed this way. I actually think Captain Marvel is an incredibly overhated film, but it still feels weird when you pluck a Phase 3 movie from between Infinity War and Endgame, only to place it in between Captain America the First Avenger and Iron Man 1 of all places. Like, yes, the film does take place in the 90s, which is between Captain America's setting and Iron Man's setting, but the tone and objective of the film is entirely different from the otherwise consistent tone and objective of Phase 1, which is, of course, to establish the MCU's main players and the foundations for their arcs. Not to mention that Captain Marvel is a character that you won't see again until Avengers Endgame, which is even further away from Phase 1 in chronological order than it is in release order. Good luck remembering who Carol Danvers is 57 MCU projects later. Yes, I counted. There are also story aspects inside of the Captain Marvel movie that hit differently, and in my opinion worse, when it's tossed into Phase 1 of the MCU. If watching in chronological order, you've seen Nick Fury for less than 5 minutes. Why the hell would you care about a young Nick Fury at this point, or care about what happened to his eye? It's not built up at all because you haven't experienced Nick Fury as a normal character yet. There's no novelty or appeal there. It makes it so that he's just like a guy in the Captain Marvel movie. In a similar vein, Captain Marvel draws on adjacent knowledge of stuff related to the cosmic side of Marvel, like Ronin, all of which you would know nothing about if watching Captain Marvel in Phase 1. Similarly, Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, and Thor do a lot of heavy lifting in the world building department by stringing together a cohesive world for the remainder of the MCU to unfold in. And Captain Marvel's space epic setting works to unravel this cohesion. And a film like this, in my opinion, only fits into the MCU's identity after the Guardians of the Galaxy and the cosmic side of the MCU have been at least somewhat established. Granted, I know 4-1 also takes place in space, but that film is largely anchored to New Mexico and Jane Foster, which keeps it grounded and tonally consistent with the rest of Phase 1. But this specific point might be more of a nitpick than anything, so let's move on. When I was originally conceptualizing this video, I was going to talk about Steve and Tony's character arcs and how chronological order detracts focus away from their individual arcs, which are low-key the main through line of the entire Infinity Saga, by the way. But when I researched chronological order, I noticed something. One of the biggest criticisms of the modern MCU is that it's bloated, featuring films, shows, and other projects, most of which debuted on
Disney Plus,
that just aren't relevant to the main through line and story of the MCU. In other words, bloat. And phases 1 to 3 are largely, asterisks, protected from this bloat, more or less, because there was no Disney Plus or established MCU that was already regarded as a money-printing machine by faceless executives somewhere in the Disney engine. No, at this time, the MCU was little more than an ambitious experiment trying to accomplish something that had never been created in cinema before. They couldn't afford to not focus on the foundations. But when you watch the MCU in chronological order, all of that bloat gets injected into Phase 1 and the entire Infinity Saga, despite the fact that a significant portion of it was created and released after Avengers Endgame. And this bloat does take attention and time away from the main characters of the Infinity Saga and their arcs, which are a lot harder to appreciate when you're forcing yourself to watch, I don't know, Marvel Runaways and Cloak and Dagger between major story beats. As I mentioned before, Steve's static arc, where he must hold true to his beliefs in the face of the US Army's shield and finally his friends, along with Tony's dynamic arc, where he learns sacrifice and scaling ways, are the narrative through lines of the Infinity Saga. And if you want a deeper dive onto those arcs, there will be videos linked at the end of this video. But the brilliance of these arcs get muddled when you experience the MCU in chronological order, which detracts from them through injected bloat and altered narrative timing. The MCU uses nonlinear storytelling to enhance moments and highlight arcs, but you miss out on that if you view the MCU in chronological order instead. I only really discussed Phase 1 in this video, but I think that's a good microcosm to illustrate the point I'm talking about, which is why I think chronological order is the worst way to experience the MCU for the first time. Anyway, I'm a YouTuber, so you probably know what I want. Do the like, comment, subscribe things if you feel like it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.